Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. In tonight's episode, I've decided to focus on a philosopher named Soren Kierkegaard. And he was a philosopher, a Danish philosopher, I believe in the 1800s, 1813 to 1855. And so he had a sort of approach to how a human being goes through three phases of life to come towards the true self. And of course, there's a little, you got to go look at the biography of this man. Pretty much, he has this quote where he says something, if I remember correctly, he says, what did Kierkegaard say? Um, you, oh man, sorry guys, give me a second. It's a quote about going backwards and forward, I know this. Backward quote, Kierkegaard. Okay, there we go. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. And so he saw three issues: boredom, anxiety, and despair. And it was pretty much his works were a resolution to this. He was trying to figure this out, that the meaning of life. I mean, the impression I have of Kierkegaard, the way at least I've understood, is that he was in a sort of, he woke up to the world at a certain age. He suddenly noticed that a lot of things that have meaning, we're just doing them. We're not noticing why we're doing them. And he has this thing where he speaks about regret, that sometimes in life you could do the right thing and the wrong thing, but there will be a regret. A sort of opportunity cost is always there. If you choose to drink coffee, you haven't drank tea. If you choose to drink tea, you haven't drank coffee. A sort of a unique kind of view on reality. Now, these three positions he has, he calls it the three, let's say, phases to life, stages to life before noticing the true self. He says there's an aesthetic life that we live. Now, in my own work, I speak about the inner realms, and the outer realms. And so the outer realms is the aesthetic life. Aesthetic is how something looks. It is the visual allure. So Kierkegaard saw that human beings, they do a lot of repetitive stuff, a lot of repetitive actions, and a lot of these are desires. As if one person experiences something nice and they go to experience it again, and again, and again, and again. So we are ruled by our passions. That was pretty much the notion of the aesthetic life. I see that as the sort of outer realm, that we as human beings, whatever we like, it's like, let's say you haven't ate for days and you see like a burger in front of you, like it's like there's going to be some sort of ruling by the passions in that moment. So there's the aesthetic life, there's the ethical life, and the religious life. I'm just going to say these three so the audience can remember them. But really, we start off from the aesthetic life, from Kierkegaard's view. Now, Kierkegaard also speaks about angst, which I'm going to tell you a bit later. Pretty much it's the kind of position we're left in as human beings, that we have a sort of anxiety between these types of life, modes of life, that phases of stages of life that Kierkegaard sees. So the aesthetic life ruled by passion, pretty much, going to the club, party, chasing youth. It's like chasing your youthfulness. Like that's pretty much being ruled by passion. That means doing things that are, I guess sports can be considered part of the aesthetic life. gastronomy, all of these. They're anything that's you're ruled by your passion, pretty much. Then we go to the ethical life. The ethical life is very different because aesthetic life, a lot of other animals have that in common. But animals, especially a lot of animals, I mean, aside from the human being, I mean, there is no ethics in nature. Like you don't see the lion eating the gazelle feeling bad, or the gazelle's family being like suing the lion. It becomes a situation where there is no ethics because there is no ideological individualism, I find. So the ethical life is the responsibility we have as human beings to tackle, we can say, the boredom, anxiety, and despair of life by actually responding to holding a certain social value. So the ethical life is like you're not just living a life for yourself, you're living a life for the good of society. And the good of society is pretty much the life of your grandchildren. Let me put a picture of Kierkegaard so people know what I'm talking about. Uh, so there is a sketch. There is a sketch of Soren Kierkegaard, this Danish philosopher. Here, you can see the picture. That's him. And one thing about, before I go into the ethical life and the religious life, I mean, kind of, I guess it bridges to that. Okay, so let's say there's the aesthetic life. You as a human being are born, you see landscape, a visual, visible landscape, you engage that. Okay, and you live pretty much as an animal, pretty much your body's purpose is fulfilled by you chasing your passions. Now, when we have the mind, the mind is the thing that is considering the additional levels of like an ethical system. You know, that means the mind is noticing itself and other variables and other elements, and it can relate itself to other variables. That means it's a sort of comparative, so the societal regulation, like pretty much social regulation, how society lives, it's like spheres of agreement, believe it or not. Sometimes it's like laws are like walls, they're like architecture, but they're architecture for the inner realm. Because the law is an abstract idea. It took us so many millions of years to evolve and have the brain capacity to be able to identify law and abide by it. That means a law-abiding citizen is the sign of an advanced, actually, creature. Because it was all lawless back in the day. Laws were new. It's just that the laws are not updating now, so people are suffering. Or the laws are not updating quick enough in accordance to the consciousness of the societies, various societies in the world. So pretty much the life of your body, the aesthetic life, after that stage, which comes through a series of repetitions, you notice the ethical life. You're like, all right, I lived as a body, I lived as a sort of animal for some time. Now, what's this mind thing that we all have? And then you'll come towards the ethical life where you're noticing more than yourself and you want to be in a system, a harmonious system beyond yourself, you know? Then we go to the religious life. The religious life, Kierkegaard says it's ruled by total faith in God. Now, what is the view? Kierkegaard was such a strange fellow that at a time where the world was actually becoming more secular, he was looking at the secular approaches and wondering how they could explain a metaphysical universe. You know what I mean? That means a scientist, for example, looks at somebody speaking about metaphysics and wonders how that can fit into the explanation of a physical universe. Kierkegaard was doing the opposite, where he was looking at a material universe and wondering how it could fit into an immaterial one, you know? And that's why where he says total faith in God, that's pretty much after you have been pretty much a passionate animal and a law-abiding human. Then there is the event, you can say, and a sort of being drawn as if the next level. It's like you played the games of the body, you played the games of the mind. Now your attention is left to be its own resolution. Where to go with this? I mean, all of this is to kind of try to suggest how one person saw that these three dimensions of life, especially going to the religious life, he was Christian, but he was also trying to be a Christian during Christendom. So what that meant is that he saw that there was a falsity in behavior, and he felt that the true relationship with some sort of God or a universe of intelligence beyond sensory perception was that it was a personal relationship. So I want, like, when people hear Kierkegaard, it's as if in his eyes, religion um, religion and his metaphysics kind of fit. That means he saw that it was as if it was such a personal relationship that it wasn't an act in public religion. That means to be a religious person is not, as in Kierkegaard's view, it wasn't like, all right, you're out in the public, you're showing off your religionhood, your religous hoodness, to the rest of the religious community. Like it becomes a situation where it's as if people are playing. It's theatrics, but beyond, Kierkegaard saw beyond the theatrics that it was a personal relationship. Now, keep in mind, the title of this episode is "What Would a Civilization of the Eternal Look Like?" And one thing I want to share is that after a person, let's say, goes through these Kierkegaardian levels, and they find a sort of resolution to angst, there's a sentence I'm going to read for you. It says, where is it? Sorry, guys, give me a second. Okay, I can't find it, but there's something where Kierkegaard says, like, that the true faith is a sort of being able to confront the absurd. So he connects it to absurdity, and the French philosophers, people like Albert Camus, Sartre, the existential atheist philosophers, they are actually inspired by this notion. So you can say um, Kierkegaard paved the way for existentialism by, at least at his time, noticing that there was a sort of absurdity to the outcomes of life. That it wasn't just like an equation that would make sense because we felt it had to. That there was something more mysterious here. That you could have a personal relationship and not in a religious context. It was when I say personal, that means your inner realms. That means nobody else can see. Just like how nobody can actually see your person, the eyes you have. People can see the expressions of your personality you reveal, but nobody can see life as you do. Like with the same eyes that you have. For me, the act of belief and the act of disbelief, they are two sides of the same coin, which means a belief and an anti-belief, they're both belief-based. One is countering the belief. One is accepting the belief. What does that mean? That means imagine there's somebody says there's a dragon behind you. A golden dragon behind you. And the person listens to this. Imagine you haven't looked behind you, and you have an option, literally like a video game: believe this person or disbelieve this person. You will see. If you believe, you don't know yet. You don't know if there's a dragon behind you, and even if you disbelieve, you still don't know. You see, so belief and disbelief are wasting time. What that means is belief in something that can be experienced or disbelief in something that can be experienced is a waste of time. That means it's like a person believing like what a swimming pool is like when there's a swimming pool in front of them, and instead of them jumping into the swimming pool to actually experience what's going on, how the water works. And of course, I mean, if you're a young kid, don't be foolish and jump into a swimming pool. But I'm saying, like, there's something about a person not playing with belief and disbelief until they actually experience something. Anything you experience, when it's fully real, it doesn't linger. Sometimes I feel that maybe our memories are moments where we actually stopped feeling real to ourselves. We think our memories are purely based on reality. But I feel it's not the case. I feel that it's the most um, impressionable event that remains with us. There's been moments in my life where it hasn't even been. There's some people say like the more abstract an idea is, the easier it is to remember. But I'm telling you, it's not about that. It's just the significance. And I don't know. I don't know if I should kind of like bring Schopenhauer into this. But Schopenhauer, this other philosopher, he had this notion. What would he call it? I don't remember. It was a German sentence. It was the the will to life, pretty much. The will to life. And Schopenhauer, this other philosopher, he saw this, the German philosopher, he saw it in a way where it was as if like every person has a will. And this will to life, um, Schopenhauer had, if I remember correctly, Schopenhauer had concluded that this will to life is primarily for procreation. For bringing higher levels and higher qualities of children in the future generations. I believe that's what Schopenhauer saw. But he also, I mean, the point to take away from Schopenhauer is that he saw something known as the will to life, this sort of unique urge in the human being, to continue to engage the game that's in front of our eyes. Pretty much, I'm trying to make the point that there was a sort of stages to life where first you were playing with the visible outer realms. Then you became mindful and noticed the inner realms. Then the true religious life is really non-dual, because the whole point of religion is that the individual identity is submitting or dissolving into the will of some collective will, whether it's storified or not. That means you can say that for me, like the shamans, who they didn't have per se religious revelation, or I mean, they had probably revelation of their own sort, but they didn't have books, and yet they had a relationship with the spirit of nature. Instead of them calling it God, like monotheistic circles do, they called it the ancestors. They called it that this what it was this contact with this sort of living force through everything. Certain shamanic cultures even had what do you call it? They had a notion of entertaining the spiritual realm. And the spiritual realm, that means imagine you're in like a sort of relatively, in appearance, primitive shamanic culture. And in that culture, you see the youngest children, they put it beside the oldest. The oldest people on the village, the oldest people who are about to pretty much transition, are put with the youngest. And somebody asked and said, why? Why do you guys do this? Why do you put the oldest and youngest person beside each other all day? You know, and they're like, the youngest one has stepped out of the spiritual realm, and the oldest person is about to enter. They're both at a very life sensitive position. One has entered the system, still having the echoes of where it came from. The other is returning to the system, you know, is leaving the system. That means I honestly feel before we developed language, we were traveling. I feel the concept of traveling from location to location, or from even our inner realms, was there before actually. So the meaning of life before language developed was a sort of journey, but I think it was an inner journey. I think when we look at on the outside and we're like, yeah, it's just evolution, but I think internally there is another set of living going on, you know. That means we think we have one life, but we could actually be living in two dimensions simultaneously, just like we have two eyes that are the same. You know, an objective outer realm and a subjective inner realm. When I close my eyes and I think about who I am, I come across to myself as the idea of the moment, the way I see a sort of self when my eyes are closed. You know what I mean? So the idea of yourself is in some sense semi is a subject, um, being an object, and your mind is being a subject that's moving an object. Your body is being an object that is moving your mind, the subject. You know, so this technically means we have both our feet in causal positions. We have a causal position for the body, literally you can move, you can cause your hand to move, and we have a causal position for the mind where the attention can move. So what it is that I feel nothing, at least in human language, stands without a dualistic filter. So every concept, what you see, some people may think knowledge is the peak of what we know, of knowing. But I will tell you, knowledge is not the peak. Knowledge is just how far we could translate the world dualistically. That means we needed two separate events to be able to compare. That means if you look at the notion of time, even Albert Einstein says, we created time so everything doesn't happen at once. So if there was no time, technically there would be no two events to compare, you know? In the religious life, I mean, religion on another level, it was the 6th century attempt to personify the cosmos. That means I have respect for the unknown. I see ideology as artwork. That means it's like, you know, when you see somebody draw something, it's like that was just the effort of the moment, regardless of how true it is or how true it isn't. You know, so when I look at nature, when I look at reality, when I look at history, when I look at all these philosophers who pretty much are just human beings who looked at their eyes and they're like, what the fuck is going on? You know, that's pretty much all of philosophy, human beings freaking out. Beyond the mask of thought, there is an unknown experiencer. This unknown experiencer for the human being that first starts as a body, I mean, like you look at children's psychology, the child is born not having a personality, so technically the child is like recording the moment as the world. So you see, um, if someone asks you, let's say you're on an airplane, somebody asks you, you want apple juice or orange juice, you know, there is an individualism to you that where the decision comes from, you know, some sort of individualism that we're moving. What I'm trying to say is that the child, the infant, the newborn child, its mind is trying to subjectively be the world. I think we are first being a subjective world, then we're extracting a subjective self out of it. Just like a child sees how the parents move and then attempts to move similarly. As if the child is seeing a system of meaning, then extends forth its own system of meaning. That previous system of meaning, I would say it's the inner realms, and what that means is like you could look at a field and you could close your eyes and you could still see that field in your inner realms. The implication of that is that visual events in behind your eyes don't respond to time. That means memory is making us feel like time travelers in the inner realm. So let us say we responded to this Kierkegaardian angst, and there is something I got to read for you about this angst. Where was it? It's long, so I'm just going to read it. So, by the way, something I don't know if I mentioned this, but the word angst in the English dictionary came from Soren Kierkegaard. So anyone who has ever used the word angst, this Kierkegaard was the person who brought that word to the English language in some sense when they translated his and Freud's work. And here's the way Kierkegaard, some person, I found a Google image of it. When people realize that they're alive and will one day die and there's no meaning to cling to, the person is in an existential crisis and would feel a sense of dread or angst. I want to read this for you that's written here. It says moral individualism. Most philosophies since Plato have held that the highest ethical good is the same for everyone. Insofar as one approaches moral perfection, one resembles other morally perfect individuals. So we have this notion since Plato of this, that morality is like when it's like everybody's becoming perfect equally. 19th century, this is Kierkegaard, the 19th century Danish philosopher Soren Kierkegaard, who was the first writer to call himself existential, reacted against this tradition by insisting that the highest good for the individual is to find his or her own unique vocation. As he wrote in his journal, I must find a truth that is true for me, the ideal for which I can live or die. So that's an interesting thing, because we want outer truths, but what can you do with an outer truth? You can just notice it. But inner truths, they seem to be more experiential, more event-based. So you can say, because Kierkegaard had a sort of Christian realism to himself, he saw a realism towards the Christian context, the notion of God. This man, he also came to the conclusion that it's absurd. Like existence is an absurd situation. Certain scholars in history have come to that conclusion. Usually it's poets, though. Poets, very quickly, life becomes absurd for them. Because it's more poetic when it's absurd. When it's too linear, it doesn't have space to move. When you're trying to be like a cookie cutter human being, it doesn't work. Uh, So yeah, so Kierkegaard's resolution to this absurdism of how, like, in this life it becomes, it's after some point meaningless because we're temporary, right? So back in the day, the temporary meaninglessness of life, that void, that gap was filled through the notion, all right, you were all pawns of this greater chess game, so then your life has not meaning to you maybe, but it has meaning for the creator, you know? But when Kierkegaard came to this notion of absurdity and the actual practically what's happening on this life, it's a bit meaningless. He came to this notion that you must find a truth that's true for you. Like if you take that in, that means it can't come from another mind. You know, there's some things that it's just you how your eyes walked in that moment, you know? And when you honor the walk of your mind so far, then what it holds becomes accessible to you. The mind is like a friend that has talents that we don't know about, but we are strangely being rude to. You know, imagine you're being rude to a friend. Little do you know, this friend is like a master musician or a master painter or something. Do you know what I mean? So it's like it's all a retaliation against the absurdism of the situation. We're just phenomena existing for some time, experiencing some things, wondering if it should search for meaning, find meaning, believe meaning, disbelieve meaning, or it comes to the free will position, which is pretty basic, that because you have free will, you can choose. Because you can choose, the outcomes can be different. Because you can enter different outcomes, you have different lives. So there is this notion of past life and future life, which the Buddhists took it really far in regards to reincarnation. But then there's this a life where I honestly feel it's neither a past life or a future life, it's parallel lives. Pretty much it's like a moment where you can see you can pick up the cup with your right hand, or you can see you can pick up your cup with your left hand, or you can pick up the cup with both hands as if as if you're super intensely like holding a cup, you know? I mean, holding a cup with two hands in like a formal gathering, people are going to be like, "Yo, this guy's taking his drink too seriously." Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is that we have come to a point that we have to use what we have. And I roamed as a philosopher, but I could tell you that I noticed my heart had a different allegiance. That philosophy is beautiful, but there's something else. That meaning is for an idea. You're looking for meaning, for truth. Truth is for a concept. Truth is a concept even. Do you know? So that means it has a conceptual value. Do you know? That means when we think about an actual truth, what if it's completely experiential? You know, what if truth is like Tomorrowland, the concert? You know what I mean? You can't believe in it. You can't believe in Tomorrowland. But when you actually go there, it's because there's a real impact of the direct experience, then the indirect ideology no longer cares. As if the moment you know if there's a dragon behind you, you don't need to believe or disbelieve if there's a dragon or not. So you see, that's the power of the eyes, that our free will becomes our plane of existence as pilot. Because we can nullify ourselves. You have two choices on this planet. You can either go towards the infinite void or the singular void. All human beings are going this way. That means pretty much they're going to live lives. Every human being is going to live a life where at the end it's either going to come down to one significant event or it's going to be different. That means the way your eyes close will suggest perhaps how they will open next. This is why when I sleep, it's kind of strange because sometimes I have this strange idea. I mean, it's something I'll share where I sometimes feel, what if I just stop? Like I transition. Literally, I stop, like breathing when in my sleep, and then I had no free will over it. I thought about that. Then I would like, all right. So that means every moment has a value, something to honor because it transitions, it passes. You know, in a talk before this, I spoke about how the inner realms could potentially be moving faster than the outer realms. This is why we can look at one thing and from different angles see it in a different meaning to it, you know. That means it feels like my mind is like an event manager and it is managing the event of how there is a self seeing a world and how there is a world that's moving itself. That means I find the major difference of the lack of nature that we find is that people become lifeless too soon. What that means is, here's the issue. Morality has to be an effort, or a conscious effort. If it's not seen as a conscious effort, it's like if you don't tell people that they got to be quiet in the library, for example, then it's as if like it's like, how many years will it pass where somebody may just naturally on their own be quiet in the library? Do you know, if nobody says anything? So some things have to be shared, because the quicker you know it, the more it changes the outcome of your, I don't know, your conclusion on how the moment moves. Because right now, reality, I have the privilege of being human. What does that mean? That means we are being first, then we are whatever's in that in moment of being. You know, that means the human thought can return to the void, but the void can't return to the void. So if you are sight through the void, technically sight through the void has no body to die, no body to break. So what does that mean? That means, this may sound ridiculous, but for the first time we may have to, and it's like the thinning of the whales, where for the first time the mind is becoming as real as the body, and the body is becoming as real as the mind. And these are different, I find, different parts of the brain of our civilization advancing. You know? You think, says it, man, it's a very large cup, and that you need two hands to hold, like literally holding the cup. It's so big, it's like a giant glass bucket, you know? It's like, here's your cup of iced tea, sir. You know, it's like a bucket of like glass bucket of iced tea with giant ice cubes, you know? All right, guys, we're 2/3 into the talk, you know, hang in there. Flight will be over shortly. All right, now to the main part. What would a civilization of the eternal look like? Guys, you don't know, this is literally my hobby. It's my hobby that anytime I have spare time, I just think about, like, okay, what would an advanced civilization realistically look like? Like, if we had painters wanting to paint this advanced civilization, what would it look like? And so I did something uncommon, is that I started from how civilization is now, and I just applied this sort of reverse algorithm. What does that mean? That means anything we have in society right now, all the buildings in society, if we had applied this reverse algorithm to it, what it would be like right now, things are like, all buildings are like platonic solids. In the future, buildings are not going to be like platonic solids. They're going to be like a museum of modern art kind of architecture, you know, kind of like very random, spontaneous shapes of buildings. When we look at cars right now, we see cars have visible outsides and invisible insides, you know. The inside of the car is invisible, the outside is visible. We are right now inside the car. In the future, it could be that there is no car, it's just energy moving. We can see a sort of invisible force replacing the body of the car, for example. So imagine, like, literally everybody is going to work through on gusts of wind or something, you know. Well, I'm just applying this reverse algorithm. So it'll be an example like right now. Um, we can say we are very material focused. We have material beliefs. The opposite, if we apply the reverse algorithm, we're going to see, for example, in the future, they're going to have immaterial, you know, beliefs. They're going to believe in things that are immaterial more easily than it's material. You see, you can see the reverse. Now, after you see the reverse, there is enough of a spectrum between the reverse of a system and how the system is to see infinite ways for that system to change. So what does that mean? That means right now we see ourselves as temporary beings. I'm going to go, all right, what's the opposite? Right now people feel temporary, they're freaking out, there's sorrow, misery, suffering, as the Buddha says. So the reverse algorithm would be where people would feel like they're eternal and they're always celebrating, joyous, and it's the opposite of suffering. Like right now people are like, oh man, what is this suffering? Like that was pretty much the Buddha's life, you know. And Schopenhauer was pretty much like copy paste of Buddha's life, technically. But I'm just saying that if we were eternal in a civilization, think of what the psychology of an undying being is. Like, it's so many people have wondered about immortality, literally seeing, like, fathoming an immortal being. Imagine having Elysium movie kind of technology. And then imagine now there is a sort of immortal psychology. What would the psychology of an immortal being look like? A being that is endlessly continuing. You will see it will be the dulling of the blade. That means if you fight in a battle and you don't change the sword, and after so many battles, like the sword is going to become dull or it's going to become weak. Right? So you can say a person living an immortal life will end up having an incredibly weak mind. Their mind has to accept the weak because its strength and immortality is becoming a nuisance, for example. That means, here's the thing, there's this idea of, like, we have the notion of survival, right? We're trying to survive right now. But imagine if we were all eternal, we all were undying, nobody ever died. What would be the purpose of life then? You know, what would be the purpose of evolution if nobody would die? Do you know what I mean? Imagine if no creature in evolution ever died and the planet was just getting filled up and filled up with historical immortality, you know? So, for me, an eternal civilization, when I think about eternity, I think about it two ways. That there is a sort of infinite approach where we attain eternity through infinite speed, or through a sort of void direction. When the person when the person driving the car steps out of the car, that is technically a moment where your movement is not based on the finite. So literally there is, I would call them like sub experiences. There's experiences and there's sub experiences. Imagine some person, was like, hey guys, what if we treat experiences like atoms and we see that they're made of smaller experiences simultaneously? You know? And guys, check this out. If in a temporary society the psychology is based on fear, that means it's easier for people to be manipulated by fear than love. That means fear is scares them, but love scares who you will be. Love scares your future. Fear scares your past. Right now, we're temporary beings. And as temporary beings, we are temporarily utilizing the moment to be a form of meaning. So the reverse algorithm to the temporary would be that it would be timeless. Imagine a timeless reality. Nobody would ever ask what time is it. Nobody would ever be late. It would be a sort of civilization where we stopped caring about the time. We started caring about the quality of the work. When we start caring about the quality of the work, then it becomes a civilization where the workforce is attaining masterpieces. That means, imagine, it's like, would you rather want an employee to give you like a limited quality of work at a short time very fast, or would you want an employee to give you a high quality solution? You know what I mean? It doesn't matter how long they take. That means if I mean, I haven't gotten to that point yet, but I mean, how would I say it? I mean, I was partners in this import business for some time. But I can tell you that if there is no freedom, there is dishonesty. And if someone is given freedom and they're still dishonest, then they don't understand where they are. That means there's no such thing as a bad employee. Every human being technically can be useful in some activity. Do you know? So there's no such thing as a bad employee. There is bad positioned employees. And let us even make this more metaphysical, more deeper, and say there are bad positioned identities or ideas. Imagine an advanced civilization where we had surpassed fear. We're like, all right, fear's there. What are we going to do? Fear till the end of till the day we die? Like, what's the point? You see, Soren Kierkegaard kind of pointed at the tip of the iceberg. Sartre, Camus, Heidegger, they pointed at the full iceberg. And Mr. Within is now saying that we have to, literally like an advanced species of designers, harness the absurd to advance civilization, the genius, the most genius chess move of the free will. That means you experienced your freedom as an individual, yet your civilization took giant steps. For me, there was a moment in 2015. When I was giving these Mr. Within talks, there would be times where I would walk and give the talk, right? And I was walking in Birmingham, mid-talk in my inner realms. I remember it was in the middle of the day I was walking, but my mind managed to see the whole buildings and everything there was in that street in Birmingham where I was walking suddenly as night, and I saw these giant lions building like skyscraper, like not skyscraper, but like half a skyscraper size, running in the streets. These giant glowing white lions, you know. That means we would have to look. We wouldn't even be able to see the lion's face. It would be so big, you know. And so that was the thing, that humanity was this colossal movement, yet it had somehow been divided and conquered by the language it had worn on its head, you know. You know, there's something that it's like no longer it's about the right object or the right subject. It's about the right event. You see, there's many animals that freak out when they are pushed to their chaos. But when the human being, when it's pushed to the brink of chaos, what does the human being do? It gives its last push, it musters all its strength, its last effort, then upon the last failure it breaks. Because literally the person doesn't have energy to maintain the psychology. So what does that mean? That means we are creatures that when we get pushed out of our stability, there comes this urgency to return to it. You know, as if it's, you know what it is? As if life is like, we thought it was about playing games. Yet this life is the great work. It is the work of a miracle. But not a miracle that can be owned by a concept. How dare language touch our eyes? Rise, mankind, rise. And the issue is that when you can see a system move faster, when you can see something happen better, and it's just not engaged, it's like something in the inner realms is cracking, like an avalanche is breaking of various ways that energy wants to move. Because there's moments in my life where I'm telling you, I don't even communicate as object or a subject of communication. There's moments I have where I just go sit and there's no language, there is nothing, it's just energetic being. It's like the energy and the attention are already something, regardless if you have language over it or not, if you have subtler layers of imagery on it or not. Because if we want an advanced civilization, we shouldn't accept an inferior one. That's the issue. If you want something better, you can't accept where you are now if you want to be somewhere better. If you have accepted where you are now, then you have assigned the limits of your vision. You're like, this is how far I go. And it's not that everybody should go far, but I'm saying the opportunity is here. Pretty much we should build an advanced civilization where right now you turn on the news, you see bad news. Oh my God, this happened there, that happened there, this stock fell down, I don't know, that building fell down. Like it becomes one of these things that it's like, are we forgetting the mystery of humanhood? Are we forgetting that we have to live life, as Morihei Ueshiba, the founder of Aikido, says, create each day anew? That you will know the Tao when you have witnessed the movement of the soul of heaven and earth. And we're still caught trying to punish hell. Do you know you cannot punish hell? Hell is hell. Conceptually, the notion of it was just a dimension of inferiority, a dimension of loop, a dimension of unconscious repetition. And that is why the mind has to live a life, not just your body. And the mind, as Kierkegaard was saying, after you have explored and in some sense you have conquered the aesthetic life, you have experienced every angle of it, you will move towards the ethical life, which means now you are required to live not as a beautiful body, but as a beautiful mind. And the ethical life means a consideration of values outside of self. So you can say youthful beauty is just looking at itself. But mature beauty realizes the world was beautiful from the beginning. There's an elegance to nature. It cannot be wrong. The wrong is in the minds of men. And this isn't said, but you have to practice your free will. Human beings have to practice your free will, especially in an unfree civilization, Speaking of existential atheists, there's a quote by Albert Camus about freedom. Albert Camus is a French existential atheist, and he has one of the most unique, rebellious. Albert Camus has an incredible, rebellious writer's voice, if I can say that. So here's the thing. The only way, oh my God, where is it? The only way to deal with an unfree world, Albert Camus was saying this, the only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. That absolute freedom has to come from the creature realizing it is okay for you to exist, and once you know it's okay, then the halls of experience open up. Then giant doors of karma open up. Because let me tell you, I don't even entertain the notion of karma, but I'll tell you, I entertain even the notion of a karmic quarantine. I feel that we are in symbiosis with a collective attributeless field that is actually looking through our eyes timelessly. I feel right now we are goggles for higher dimensions, really. And we have to find a way. For how long? I mean, let's say we all become super secular and materialist to a point where we're like, yeah, no, just what we see, you know? And for how long? Eventually, like thousands of years, if we continue that far, we're going to be like, okay, now let's stop lying to ourselves and really look at the subjective design and the objective design. Because an advanced civilization is not burdened by imagery or sound anymore. Do you see? This is why I saw when I noticed that there's this whole thing about cyberbullying. In reality, I noticed it's not cyberbullying. It's the viciousness of language being self-interpreted, because no one ever knows how you know. Do you see? That's the beauty of life. It's the ultimatum of, as how Shirin Sargadad Maharaj, this guy says, diversity without separateness is the ultimate that the mind can touch. That means being unique yet being unified. That is the glow of the star we're attempting to follow for now. The ancient Greeks said to tame the savageness of man and make gentler the life of this world. And we must tame the savageness within. We must see that there's been moments, I will tell you, I have fought my desires in my inner realms. What I mean by that is that sometimes I have lost those battles of my desires, And the most important thing in this life is when a person loses, this is how you know the honorable general compared to the other. The honorable general knows when the end is the end. What is there to fear when a mass, the whole of this life, a massive amount of this life is unknown? What are people freaking about? What are people so strictly trying to believe or disbelieve or prove or disprove? Do you see? It's just 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere. Somehow they've noticed themselves. They're communicating to each other. Now they're wondering if their communication and the reasoning of how they each have an intelligence and intellect and some sort of invisible viewer within. This invisible viewer is there's a huge potential that in the future it will be realized to be. Technically, we think there is minds in a world, but no, there are worlds in minds. What if there was never matter here? What if the universe was a solipsist? Albert Camus says, I rebel, therefore we exist. Check this out, guys. Francis Bacon says, small amounts of philosophy lead to atheism, but large amounts bring us back to God. Jiddu Krishnamurti, all ideologies are idiotic, whether religious or political, for it is conceptual thinking, the conceptual world, which has so unfortunately divided man. We have Mark Twain. Pessimism is only the name that men of weak nerve give to wisdom. You see, guys, our world is filled with intelligence. Every human being's eyes is carrying a way they are perceiving this dimension. Now we have found a sort of outer realm allegiance. The internet's kind of allowing the globalization of individual creatures from around the world to access certain, communities of thought or vision. And now the inner realms have to roar. Now it's coming for the first time, a massive multidimensional trust me, guys, you live in the UK for some time, the word massive gets ingrained in your mind. Honor seems to be caring for what there is. If we don't care for what there is, technically it's as if we're treating the world as if we don't exist in it. The human being not only has to care for who they are, they not only have to care for who others could be, They don't have to only care for how the world is or how the world would be, but they require to care for the whole moment where all classifications of the realm stand in one moment. Through one being, a realm appeared. You see, for me, that there is a sort of thing about, I don't know why, in my inner realm sometimes, because I write a lot of science fiction, I have written a lot about, like, my science fiction is, of course, a bit uncommon, but um, I have this vision of this sort of commander with a galactic fleet in one chapter of my science fiction novel. Right? And this commander is from the Central Sun Legion, which is pretty much all the suns in my science fiction novel, which will be out soon, hopefully. Um, it's just like the sun. Hope is light in the room. Despair is when that light is fading. And so there is a light to every human being right now as I speak. It's literally how your mind is like the candle flame and your body is like the biological wax. And so this candle flame tends to think that its purpose in this reality has to be based on the objective outcome. That means it's for so many people, it's easy for them to visualize what they want to have, but it's much harder for them to visualize who they will be when they have that, whatever desire you have. That means sometimes it's not important to just desire something, but it's to wonder who you will be if you had that desire. That means sometimes I study my desires before I bite into the fruit, you know? What does that mean? That means if you in your mind can see yourself desiring a yacht, you're trying to literally visualize if you were standing on that yacht in the ocean, what would the feeling be and how would you feel after? Let's say a weeks after. In my inner realms, I can fathom the utility of an object for weeks or months or something like that. You know, I could see how things can echo, you know? And I think that's the thing. It's the awareness of activity which is being the mind. The mind is awareness of the activity. It's for the mind, our psychology and personalities are like the glow of intelligence. Albert Camus says freedom is nothing but a chance to be better. Truth and freedom. Sorry, this quote's a bit blurry. I can't read it. Truth and freedom. Having few lovers or demanding mistresses. That's the thing about the psychology of someone who entertains the absurd. They have no filters because it all comes to the absurd. That means it's like, I think there's no such thing as sanity because we don't have DNA, the same DNA. We're not clones to have a certain kind of behavior that we can all fit into, you know, like an Iron Man suit. You know, that's the thing, that our morality is like these Iron Man suits that not everybody can fit into them. Do you see? And so the modern morality has to surpass an ideological suit and actually become the efficiency of action. That means an idea's value is really where that idea takes itself in the moment. Does it move towards being an expression, or does it just remain as just, you know, a cloud passing by? Albert Camus says freedom is the right to never have to lie. Albert Camus says, without freedom, no art. Art lives only under the restraints it imposes on itself and dies of all others. This is why, guys, you have to take your craft, or your whoever's an artist listening to this, you got to take your art form as your hidden sacred relationship with with the cosmos. What do I mean by that? That means I am like, I could sit somewhere and endless people can judge me and I could hear what they're saying. But those judgments all are kind of like coming to this mirror and bouncing back. You know, they come to a point where who I am as a being, it's not defined by outside of me. Because if you're defined by outside of you, you get nervous. You're like, holy shit, how is society looking at me? Oh my God, how am I looking at society? You know, how do I look in society? Like, so it becomes a silly artificial humanhood. You know, that means in this life we're not here to be the same, which technically means if you don't honor your eyes, you have forgotten why the world is here. And now we have to honor the eyes of an advanced civilization. We have to call forth for the greatest, biggest projects of design ever. You know, because design is at the core of technology. And that's the way man has. Technically, I saw shamanism, meditation, mysticism. For me, they are kind of like inner technologies. They have to do with how language and the meaning and the implication of phenomena relates to direct experience. You know, that means after you have been in many known and unknown battlefields, then you stop imposing value. You know what that means? That means after you've mastered something, you stop playing. Those people who sometimes play with something, it's because they are new to it. You know? That was the difference between the martial artist that between the master martial artist and the novice. The novice in battle would just be like, I'm gonna go defeat the guy, I'm stronger than the other person, would go and fight savagely in a battlefield. But the master would fight in a battlefield, but in his inner realms, his mind and attention to the moment was as if he was walking in a garden. That means some people can be incredibly intense in their outer realms and at incredibly high levels of skill, and in their inner realms they can be totally somewhere else. I'm telling you, sometimes when I give these talks, I am hovering between screens, if I can say that, in my inner realms. I am moving between screens because reality is vision. For me, my body became a temple, but it became a temple of an event. That means it's like first you chase truth, then truth chases you. Then there is no you to chase truth, then you find the world of truth. Now, if you accept the world of truth, you will come back down to chase truth. But when you are in the world of truth, when you don't accept it, you come down. When you accept that world of truth, when you realize that there could totally be a non-ideological implication to humanity, you know, whether we look at it again from an Aristotelian efficiency cause, agency cause, or a final purpose. That means really it feels like I really feel my existence and my experience, they're like a symphony. They're like a music being played. And this music will one day stop being will stop playing. And it's this situation where it's like, what do we do in life? Where does our attention go? For all my ancestors, they lived for themselves. They were super. They had mastered living just for them. Only their whole life being occupied by what their life meant. You know. But for me, it feels that the individual life, it's kind of intentional. It feels like we have designed a system that it's hard to be an individual in, so we can actually notice the collective. That means in a civilization where their individual freedom is absent, technically, if there's individual freedom absent, that means there is the collective unknown. So what it means is sometimes when you break, there's space for a new experience. Sometimes when something leaves, the different dimensions of the realm unlock. Because really, the mind is semi-unknown. We know its effect. We don't know its causal. There's no way, I say personally, like I've created the term for it, coined the term the language threshold. Beyond the language threshold, there is no dualistic based entity. There could be an infinite dualism, like you could feel like an incredible multidimensional being who's living multiple lives in different universal frameworks. But I'm telling you, after some point, imagine if life was an activity and you did the activity. What then? Imagine life had a purpose and you completed the purpose. What then? Imagine right now you had completed your life, your purpose in this life. What would you do next? Then it would be a sort of, after you have found the individual heaven, you will move from the Buddhic mind towards the Bodhisattvic mind. And what does that mean? That means first you are in an individual hell. You get yourself out of your individual hell, you come to your individual heaven. Now this is the establishing of the advanced communicator. The individual member of the human civilization gets its shit together pretty much. Right? From the individual hells, you come to the individual heaven. Now the individual heaven is where you notice the collective hell. That means I'm telling you, there's as much as there is wealthy people in this realm, probably, there's probably like kings and queens who have cried for their kingdoms because they have truly seen its misery from the top. You know, right now I'm just some person in a corner of a universe, but I can totally see that the eyes of man has opened wide, and now they need to deepen. Now it has become about the depth. We have to release the poets. We have to unchain the potential of the gods. You know, that means something a lot of people don't consider about Greek mythology. The Titans was the ego of the gods, and it would chain the extreme power. And imagine, like right now, I love movies, like action movies, where they show like incredible, like these SWAT teams or whatever. And then I thought, what if in civilization we have like a police force? What if we have a communication force? Now, hear me out on this. What if we had a sort of like the global community got together and developed this idea of the whole a community of advanced communicators. That means, imagine there's domestic violence, and instead of calling the police, they call an advanced communicator, which comes with some member of the police or whatnot. You know, and the advanced communicator comes and communicates, noticing the inner realm and outer realm of each person. Like those people who are really good at their work in customer service, those people who have customer service jobs, they totally understand this inner realm, outer realm thing. Those people in the sales industry, they totally understand this inner realm, outer realm thing, I'm saying. You know? And philosophers, of course, they were of the first lions that roared. An advanced civilization deserves advanced effort. That means if you wondered about the greatest kind of human being you could be, then that would be one step closer to us, humanity, figuring out how we can become the most advanced civilization. Because we are the input. We are inputting what the civilization is outputting back at us. Now, the issue is the output is not clear. Literally, if we looked at politics like an engineer, we'd be like, all right, it's as if like communication from the people is going. there, and just like a phone or a service that's kind of blocked or something, it's not the same communication coming back. So pretty much in negotiation, the only point that negotiation works if you find a heaven in the middle, you know. If you find a sort of situation where the parties at the table both are winning. That means if like civilization is divided between good and evil people, and you bring both good and evil people on like at the same table, and are like, all right, guys, we're gonna be here for a while. Stop this shit. Because the whole notion is we are branding meaning onto the objective realm. We are judging everything. We have standards of perfection, yet being imperfect temporary creatures, you know? We judge ourselves like machines, yet we are not machines. And so that's where the human heart has gone missing. And it's songs like literally like guitar, like imagine like a heavy metal guitar at night being played loud in a neighborhood. That's how the truth is going to sound. It's going to sound like the disturbance of the gentleness of the past. That means seldom this is said, but greatness sacrifices greatness as well. You know, that means when there was a bunch of experts and one expert had more skill than the others, and all three of them were great experts, the two experts would let the first one lead to see how quickly they could solve the problem. You know, because if we develop a civilization where people have egos, but while they have egos, they develop skills, then at some point we consider that they will eject out of their plane of thought, how they've been looking at reality, because the meaning of it changes. It's activity based. Like right now, me communicating everything I'm saying, it's like in my inner realms, it's just adding image, 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 image. And when I look at life, it's like an image that's there. The reality is imagination that I didn't need to imagine, you know? And imagination is reality that's kind of there but never is, you know? That it's accessible in design. I could visualize an apple pie just hovering in the air right now in my inner realms, but I can't take a bite out of that apple pie. Do you see what I mean? That means your mind gives you access and noticing the designs of its generation, but we can't actually define the mind. So the mind is the definer. So we're like, what do we do? And you know, like here, I'll read for you the dictionary definition of mind. Let's just see how the dictionary defines mind. I'm going to tell you, it's going to be like there. It's literally like somebody who doesn't know, but who's trying to give an answer. The definition of emptiness is the same too. You know, it's probably counter. So here, mind. Okay, first of all, there is how many? Oh my God, it's a giant list. Okay, not that giant. So it's a noun. The element of the mind, literally the dictionary, Saint Dictionary says, the element of a person that enables them to be aware of the world and their experiences, to think and to feel. The faculty of consciousness, the element of a person. Like how poetically abstract is a dictionary? A poet? Like what is this? You know, the element of a person that enables them to be aware, and we don't know that element. That's why we have the hard problem of consciousness. Neurologists are tripping right now. We're treating our mind like it's a hallucination of elemental forces, elemental laws. But the free will has a different story. Or perhaps it's even beyond stories. A freedom beyond stories. Wonder about that, and experientially, once you don't chase the butterfly has already landed on your forehead. The mind has opened itself to its potential, and then it's just a kinetic resolution. So after you know what, first it's important to know what to do, then after you know what to do, the only thing that remains is to go forth. Those two words are the most powerful words ever. Go forth. And so And its civilization of the eternal look like, it will look like what we deserve. What is this? What we don't deserve this kind of civilization we see right now. In our minds, we can see it being more abstract. The moment we add science fiction writers in the world, that was a moment where people were like, no way, we could update it. But people didn't run after it. Why? Because the system made it so hard for the mind to open its eyes anew. And people are really living repetitive lives, and it kind of breaks your heart. At the same time, man's heart can never be broken. You know, I mean, the individual's heart can be broken, of course, but the species, and it goes on. The species never gets offended. It's people that get offended. You know, the species is a roar. It's like this continuity. It's like a herd of buffalo just running in outer space, you know? Can you imagine like a herd of buffalo, just giant herd of buffalo, just suddenly all of them start running as if like they could run in the air, and they all start running towards the sun, and they go in outer space. You know what I mean? Literally, that's how it feels. We are running towards surpassing the obstacles that are defining the limits of our civilization. And if we can design something better, then the only way, if we can see something better and we don't pursue it, we have been fools before we couldn't have. And I don't know, guys, this world is strange. It's as if people are so satisfied with their how their attention moves in the day. I don't know how many people really wonder what's going on here. You know, like for me, my whole life feels like literally I'm opening my eyes in a room, and I'm like, what's happening here? What's going on? Who's doing this? And little did I know, in my youth, I blamed the world for my inefficiency. Little did I know it was me, you know, that if we have accepted inefficiency first, we have lost before stepping into the battlefield. I honestly feel if aliens were outside our atmosphere and they were looking at us, um, they would probably, like, the only a sign that we were an advanced civilization would just be our communication. That means it's like before you communicate to someone, it's like you're studying how they communicate with themselves or with others. When I see an angry person, that's a human being that doesn't know how to communicate with themselves. You know, they're not even aware who they are. You know, anger is being possessed by the past. And passion is like being possessed by the future. And that's the thing, you know, I'm telling you, it's like three chess moves. You either stick to how the past was living, you either neutralize and don't care about yourself or the world, or you live for how the future is going to live. Nothing is cooler than the future. A civilization of the eternal will not have a notion of weakness, just like Napoleon says the word impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. That means in a world so unknown, where is the edge of knowledge? Who has found a ruler that they can measure this endless sky? And do you know the implication of the world being multidimensional? It means everything in this dimension was just like one side of the coin, you know, or one side of many coins. I could kind of establish some sort of theory. Let's say it's kind of multidimensional coin theory, let's call it. And what is this idea? This idea is that imagine you have a coin, you have, let's say, like endless infinite coins, okay? And you start off with one coin, and you notice that on one side of, and imagine all these coins are on an invisible table in space, you know? So they're all like placed in the same kind of position, but they have a spacing between one another, like a line of coins in space, infinite line of coins in space. Now imagine that on one side of each of these coins there is the same world, the same shape, like it's just heads, you know. That means it's like one picture, one shape. Let's say it's like one side of the, so in one side of all the coins is the same, the other side of all the coins are different. Pretty much I want to suggest that we can use this multidimensional coin theory as a way of referring to a type of multidimensionality, that it's dual, yet because it's infinite, it finds an ability to transcend duality. So infinity is a sort of exit out of duality. Just like the void is a sort of exit out of the singular. And Zen monks and Buddhists understand this. Zen Master Dogen, he says, honestly, it was as if somebody was in a rush and asked him, he's like, hey, Dogen, can you tell me what enlightenment is? Man, I'm late, you know? I'm late for work. And Dogen was like, holy shit, this guy's honest, man, right? And this story is abstract, but I'm just saying, like, imagine if there was a story like this. And Zen Master Dogen says to follow the Buddha's path is to study the self. And just to comment here, the self is a homework assignment no teacher usually gives the person, because most teachers are like, look at me. They don't say look at the world, they say look at me. But the me never has eyes to even be seen. That means once you realize there's a part of you that is not an object, you stop having objective desires. But you can evoke them, of course, anytime you can have objective desires. Yeah. But they don't become part of, like, it's as if energy is not going to you thinking about your objective desire because you have a resolution on the self. So anyways, Zen Master Dogen says to follow the Buddha's path is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to awaken to the nature of all things. Okay, guys, I would like to read for you, before I end off, actually, a book I wrote called Commands of a Celestial General. Sorry, Commands of a Cosmic General. Commands of a Cosmic General. And it was something I wrote in 2015. It's unpublished, and I felt like just reading a few entries from it. This entry, and they're short entries, just these short passages I wrote. The fascinated and the empty. What is the truth of these words when the reader begins from your mind? Every shape is a shapeless guide. Wisdom dwells in the kind to surge in misty skies. Wisdom dwells in the kind to surge in misty skies. We are all fascinated by the audacity to create, and so as the tundra awakens to the next calm, the storm was never a part of us. You see, the command of man's mind is a new advocacy of a cosmic administration. All phenomena is suggesting your absolute nature and the depths of your mind. For when you exist, you cannot avoid your eternity through every temporal step. Sorry, I'll read that again. For when you exist, you cannot avoid your eternity through every temporal step. We are vaster than we think, so the demise is an unnecessary disguise. Rise beyond all ignorance. If the voice of, so this one's called Find the Voice, from this work of prose called Commands of a Celestial General. If the voice of the planet became yours, what would you say? Are there any casualties when it comes to consciousness? The workings of a celestial general is the work of the cosmos. Who bought Saturn's ring? If time and space could fight in a job market, the interview would already be over. Seek the gentlest that open your mind beyond all doors of ignorance. The key is direct experience through self-aware attention. If you were the God of all gods, um, if you were the God of all gods, sorry guys, I think I've miswrote this one. If you were the God of all gods, would you take responsibility of royal creation in the eyes of all life? To become the cosmos, one must first be the edges of the painting, the edges of the painting to see new possibilities. What gives the world its shape when your eyes are shapeless? These questions have come to break open all barricades that cage the vastness of the mind through the insignification of belief. You are not here to believe things. You are here to live in absolute being. You are here to live in absolute being. The silence in the library can too be found on the empty page. The sacred don't need initiation and duality. When the unified were one initiated cause. Don't be bothered by unnecessary effects. The God-conscious live as all within all that is. Can these words be messengers of one message? Ask your eye for the secrets they hold. You are the light of the cosmos. The vigorous void. Have these words learned to crawl before walking into the imagery of many worlds? Ask yourself a question that purifies your heart in an instant. Not that the heart is impure, but involuntary beatings are a choice of interpretation. So what gives way to the new efficient methods of man's perception? The simple availability of conscious self-acknowledgement. gives the platform of our attention infinite space to take off and to be taken off. What is free before what can be free? The questions of the quest are creating the journey and the mist to come. Existence is not a void when you do not avoid who and all that you are. So, yeah. We can't avoid what we are. That's the cool thing about life. It's as if it's like a roller coaster ride. You've already paid for the ticket and you're on. Now you have to enjoy, appreciate, observe, advance. And let the actions of a better world and more efficient world guide the past's demands, you know. The moment is complete. It's just that the mind divides itself dualistically, so there exists incompletion. It's like the incomplete is in the complete. So anyways, thanks for listening, everyone. I hope this episode was helpful. Much blessings and namaste.